Hi, I'm Peter J. Ray. Welcome to Adventures in History. Today's topic is Zuck family reunions at Lakeside, Ohio, USA, 1890 to 1990. The original publication was produced by Joan Tracy Ray, the wife of Richard Ray, my father's brother. Zuck family memories of Lakeside, Ohio, USA, 1890 to 1990. This memory book was written by Zuck family members in honor of the 100th family reunion at Lakeside, Ohio on August 19, 1990. This memory book is dedicated to the descendants of Frank and Lena Zuck, who for the past 100 years have been a part of the Lakeside reunions, and to the descendants of those here today, whom we hope will continue the rich tradition of the annual Lakeside gathering. Nancy Tyler. When I go to Lakeside, it is like going back in time. Seeing the family members and hearing the stories of the past awakes many, many memories of my childhood and the happy times spent with my parents, grandparents, and sisters and brother. It is so great to see my many cousins that I grew up with and share our memories. Lakeside is love and nostalgia and beauty everywhere. Nancy Tyler. Gregory Lacey. I am looking forward to reading all the memories. I'm also looking forward to seeing everyone again. It is a very special feeling being part of such a large family. One of my favorite memories is when all the kids were upstairs on the third floor of the, I forget the name, big greenhouse. We used to have some incredible pillow fights. It was our time away from the adults. We told stories, jokes, some clean, some not so clean, ate our stockpiled candy, and generally had a good time. And of course the adults would come up the stairs and tell us all to be quiet and go to sleep. We used to bet on which parent would come up next. I have so many memories it is hard to find a few favorites. I think I picked this one because it reminds me of my childhood. It reminds me of how carefree we were and how full of energy and life we were. That's why I keep coming back. Gregory Lacey. John S. Ray. As a small child, I remember looking forward to Lakeside with great anticipation each year. I have a very specific memory of there being some sort of wooden rafts available when we arrived at Lakeside. And we used to have a great amount of fun playing with these wooden rafts out in the water and hiding underneath them in the water and turning them over and just thoroughly enjoying the water and the company of the other children who were there. I recall Tommy Zuck when he was a very strong young man going down to the end of the Lakeside Pier during a big storm and jumping off the end of the pier into the big waves to show how strong he was. I remember that he was wearing some striped gold and black shorts, and he had a great amount of difficulty getting back on the dock because the waves were so high. The great kindness and compassion which Grandma Zuck showed to everyone is burned into my memory. I recall Grandpa Zuck vividly because of his fine appearance, and he always had a twinkle in his eye, and was always ready to sit down and have a game of anagrams. As a child, I recall that we had so many people in attendance at several of the Lakeside gatherings that we had to rent 2 or 3 different houses. I recall that a major fire occurred during one of the outings at Lakeside. The all-night poker games, which we used to have many years ago, are still in my mind, and were participated in by my father, Harold, Harold's father, Frank, Uncle John Zuck, Uncle John Lacey, and whichever of the kids had enough money to get into the game. I remember sleeping on the dining room table several times because all of the beds in the house were taken, and there was simply nowhere else to sleep. Excuse me. I remember Red and I, with our 4 children, sleeping on the floor in one small room in a little white cottage over on Cherry Street. I remember Pamela burning her hand at one of the Lakeside gatherings, and our having to take her to the hospital because of that. I remember in the old days there used to be slot machines over at Erie Beach, just on the other side of the fence outside Lakeside, and I recall it was high adventure to go over there and play a few pennies and nickels. I also recall that there used to be a dance place at Erie Beach where we would go in the evenings and really dance up a big storm. I remember going fishing with my father and Uncle Frank and Uncle John over at Channel Grove and very much enjoying the whole process. I remember before Red and I were married taking her to Lakeside and hoping that she would not be scared to death by all the relatives who were present. I remember Harold Freilich swimming all the way from Kelly's Island over to Lakeside, and I remember our renting a boat and taking a number of the children, who were strong swimmers, out into the lake, and they're attempting to swim from Lakeside over to Kelly's Island. We had to abort the trip because we ran into a lot of green stuff out in the middle of the lake, and we did not want the kids to try swimming through that. I remember many shuffleboard tournaments with a good-sized piece of Swiss cheese as a prize for the winners. And I remember many tennis games, putt-putt games, jungle volleyball games, and I certainly remember the basketball game when Mark fell and broke his hip and his elbow at the same time. I remember all of the cousins having an opportunity to get together: Peter, Michael, Greg, John, and Christopher. This is already too long, and my mind is filled with many other pleasant memories as well, and I certainly do not mean to exclude any of the other pleasant memories by failing to mention them specifically. Lakeside has been a very important part of our lives, and I hope that it will continue to be so. John S. Ray. Georgianne Zuck Davis. My memories of Lakeside are in two parts: early childhood and the later growing up times. I missed about 15 of the reunions while living in Illinois. As a child, Lakeside meant the summer family vacation, and the excitement mounted as the time grew near. I remember loving to play on the rocks, play on the bikes, and play and swim by the pier. I found myself in real trouble swimming by the pier one time, gasping for breath and in a panic. It was Stephen Lacey to the rescue. I've had a great respect for deep water ever since, and I'm still not a good swimmer. In more recent years, I've appreciated the gatherings together and renewal of family friendships. It meant so much to my father and mother. They often made several trips to Lakeside instead of staying over. I remember one day when Dad went over 3 times. That was when he lived in Huron and Mother could no longer travel. He loved everything about Lakeside. My thanks to John and Ruth for keeping it all together. It really is the summer highlight. Georgianne Zuck Cummings. Joan Ray. 1961. The big claw-footed table in the dining room at the Annie Laurie. Mismatched chairs being pulled out, scraping along the hardwood floor. The shuffling of the cards, penny ante, night baseball. A 5-cent limit on raises, endless cups of lukewarm coffee. Day baseball. Overflowing ashtrays. Is the pot right? Tall piles of poker chips in front of happy faces. Short piles of chips in front of anxious faces. Up and down the river, jacks are better to open. The muted sound of a radio with its ubiquitous baseball game. The pleas of someone frantically trying to get change for a 5. Misdeal, try again. Down and dirty. The challenge of trying to make sense of a hand when 3s, 9s, and red one-eyed jacks are wild. Tin upon tin of delicious homemade cookies on a sideboard, not old enough to be an antique, but with enough mileage to have character. Bleary-eyed players gradually giving in to fatigue. One more hand, groans as another game of red dog is dealt. The last pot, the accounting. All winners, no losers. Collapsing in bed at 5 o'clock a.m. A rude awakening by a 2-year-old at 6 o'clock a.m. The oh-so-fervent vow to quit the game tonight by 3 o'clock. Joan Tracy Ray. Lisa Wiesenhauer. My most memorable experience from Lakeside is as a child, saving as much money as possible to play putt-putt with Grandpa Ray and all the cousins. It is my sincere hope that each member of our family, with our different lives and ambitions, will continue the Zuck tradition of Lakeside and preserve the value of family in the next 100 years. Lisa Wiesenhauer. Richard Ray. Want to go fishing? The reunion was 1939 or thereabouts when John Zuck asked me if I wanted to go fishing with him. A group of his cronies were coming up to Lake Erie for the day and had chartered a fishing boat from Channel Grove just west of Lakeside. It sounded like a great idea to me, so off we went and found the Marion contingent assembled at the Channel Grove dock ready to go. There were maybe 10 to 12 men in the group, including the boat pilot. I was the only teenager on board. Out on the lake, we started reeling in fish almost without effort and in good numbers. After this went on for an hour or two, the pilot announced that he was turning back because he didn't like the look of some black clouds blowing in from the west. Now, a Channel Grove fishing boat is designed to carry people and fish, but not to outrun an onrushing Lake Erie storm. Chugging along at what seemed like 10 to 12 miles an hour, we suddenly found ourselves drenched with wind-blown spray from waves that towered higher than the boat. Since we were still a good mile offshore, the pilot saw the futility of trying to make it back and turned the bow into the waves. Fishing was quickly forgotten, and no one needed any urging to don life jackets. They were hastily tied on, and everyone grabbed an open spot of bench seat to sit on and hold on to. It was no longer fun and games. It was white-knuckle time. Someone yelled out, "How are we going to get out of this?" Another man yelled back, "If we get out of this." I remember the pilot shaking his head while he struggled with the wheel, saying, "This boat was never meant to take a beating like this." And a crashing beating it was. The boat would be lifted completely out of the water by one wave, crash down into the following trough only to be lifted up again. There were times when the boat didn't have enough space to recover from one downhill crash before the next wave. When that happened, the entire boat would go through instead of over the wave, causing a torrent of water to cascade into the open back of the boat. John Zuck had lurched down on a bench seat opposite me, which he held onto about as tightly as his water-soaked cigar was clamped in his mouth. Gone was the broad smile that so often lighted his face. In its place was a look of grim concern while he tried to judge how hard the next wave would hit. And I remember someone shouting about whether the boat was actually beginning to sink, or whether it was just awash with all the waves coming aboard. Then suddenly the wind let up and the waves quieted down. But everyone was through with fishing for the day. They wanted no more of it. With considerable relief, the pilot headed toward his dock and solid ground. For years afterward, every time I saw John Zuck, he would smile and call out to me, "Hey, Dick, do you want to go fishing?" Richard Ray. Carol Wiesenauer. In 1956, Dave and I took Lisa to Lakeside for the first time. She was 16 months old. She was still taking a bottle and had a very healthy appetite. For a reason that I can't possibly understand now, I only took one nipple for her bottle. Somehow, during the early morning hours of our first night, the nipple was lost. It was time for Lisa to eat. There was no way to give her a bottle, and no stores were open to get a replacement. She and I spent the night in the kitchen of the cottage to keep her howls of hunger as subdued as possible. We were not too successful. The next morning, all problems were solved with the purchase of several new nipples. Carol Wiesenauer. John Lacey. After the evening activities had subsided, we young ones trudged up the old creaky wooden stairs into the attic of the cottage. With parents thinking peace and quiet at last, us cousins commenced the biggest whiz-bang pillow fight south of Lake Erie. The boisterous ruckus ended with the girls being pummeled until they begged for mercy. Finally, the grand, shy cottage settled into a peaceful slumber, and another cool evening descended on Lakeside. I must have experienced post-pillow fight hysteria because I just couldn't get to sleep. I went over to the attic window and looked out toward the dock and the soft yellow lights that lit the way for late-night strollers. The Lakeside Carillon told the time, and I thought it the most soothing music I had ever heard. It had been a glorious day filled with activities with loved ones, and the bells of Lakeside were a perfect ending. I'll never forget that exact moment. Whenever I hear bells like Lakeside's, memories of so many great times come to life for me. That cool evening and so many other times will always be special. John Lacey. Jennifer Dirth, about Lakeside, Ohio. It was fun. The people were so nice. I liked the birdcage chair. I liked Great-Grandma Ray. Skipping rocks was fun. I pet a big fish in a bucket. 9-year-old Jennifer can only remember one visit several years ago to Lakeside. Jennifer Dirth. Mark Ray. My most memorable moment was swimming back from Kelly's Island as a teenager. Actually, it wasn't quite all the way back. That year we had green algae, thick as pea soup almost, and we were worried about the motor in the boat getting stuck. But it was still a major distance. Of course, this was after hearing for years about Harold Freilich's feat. I can't imagine even trying it now with all the boats around. I remember my friend Chip Richmond and my two sisters, Pamela and Patricia, and even little Peter making the effort. The water tower was the only landmark. Of course, we all got split up. I arrived first on the beach, much to the amazement of an elderly couple watching from a park bench. I really felt like I had arrived from the other side of the world, and following in the footsteps of the Zuck spirit of adventure. Mark Ray. Cheryl Myers. As a person who did not know many of you until a few years ago, I would just like to say how welcome you have all made me feel. As I come to each reunion, there are people I come to know a little better each year, and I gain a little more insight into the family. I have learned a lot about my mother's family from the people who've known her, and since my dad never has told us much, I treasure your stories about her. The journals Peter has printed up for all of us, the interviews he is doing with members of our family, the accomplishments of many of our family are truly remarkable. Cheryl Myers. Ruth Ray. Grandma Zuck, she was the one who epitomized Lakeside for me. She was the one who made me feel so welcome and was so accepting. I remember her love for the babies. Grandpa Zuck was distinguished looking with a twinkle in his eye and a sense of humor. I remember vividly a lot about Lakeside. This will be my 41st consecutive year at Lakeside. Nostalgia, what we do for love. My first year, 1949, the year before John and I were married, I was Barb Smith's roommate. As teachers, we had a lot in common. Each year following, John and I had the same room. The year Pamela was 2 months old and slept in the closet, it was so hot. Eventually, we had all 4 children, Mark, Pamela, Patty Ann, and Peter, sleeping on the floor in the same room. We used to go Friday night and stay through Labor Day weekend. It used to be a marathon of poker all night, eating cans of cookies, and swimming and tennis all day. The Zuck women were great cooks. Aunt Florence's famous lemon pie. The flaky crust was Gertrude's, though. Joan and I were low women on the totem pole, so we peeled tons of potatoes, and our hands were full of meatloaf. The men did the dishes, though. Some years were so hot. Sometimes it rained a lot. Almost every year I came home sick. The year we bought so many peaches and I canned them, I felt like they were gold. We even went the year Mark was in the hospital with pneumonia and a collapsed lung. His teacher, Mrs. Zuck, visited him for us. That was a tough one. One year, Mike was born. When we had Peter, they became good friends. One year, Mike asked Peter why he had, quote, that hair on your forehead. And so Peter cut it off just before his photo was taken. Remember the Frisbees? Remember the cigarettes? Remember Gertrude's pot roast collapsing the baggie? Our big change came when we accidentally discovered that although we only used the cottage for Labor Day weekend, Doran was paying for the whole week, so we decided to use it for our family for the week. Later, others joined us. We had to find another larger house. John and I took the family and camped at Bay Point and went door to door at Lakeside. We did that again later until we found the Bags and later the Shy House. Great houses. There were years when we had so many girls, Pamela, her friend Holly, Patricia Ann, her friend Mary, Lisa, Kathy, and Tracy. Then when the Lacey's came, we had an attic full of boys. Mark, Mark's friend Chip Richmond, Mike, Peter, Greg, John, and Chris. Remember the pillow fights? Chip always brought a big ham and lasagna. Pamela knew how I hated spending all day in the kitchen, so the year she was 15, she said she would do all the cooking. Pamela and Holly got up at 5 o'clock a.m. and made liver casserole. Pamela didn't eat it herself. Helen and Pamela made pancakes, and Pam burned her hand severely picking up a hot plastic bowl on the stove, her cello hand. The year Pamela died, 1971, at age 16, I was devastated. I walked into the Christian bookstore, walked straight to a book, Not Death at All by Norman Vincent Peale, and it fell open to the pages that said it was, quote, high honor that some can finish their life work at an early age. I have sent those pages to many others. Mrs. Baggs was my angel that year. We've had family come from distant parts. Tommy Zuck from California, Rachel's from Georgia, Nancy from Michigan and Tennessee, Mark and Dr. Patricia Ray from Boston, the Dirths and Mike Ray from Chicago, the Dick Rays from North Carolina, the Lacey's from New York, Lenore and Dale from Florida, and the Frelicks from Maine. Will Peter come from the Philippines? The last few years, my Aunt Chris and Cousin Bill from Ontario and my mother Augusta from Saskatchewan have been coming, so we have become international and bride players. Mark fell and broke his hip and elbow playing basketball, another tough one. We had Helen's 90th birthday and my mother Gus's 90th birthday at Hotel Lakeside. Now we're celebrating the 100th anniversary and John and my 40th wedding anniversary. Nostalgia, what we do for love. Ruth Smallshaw Ray. Lenore Zook Hughes. Nearly every afternoon after his work at the Star office was finished, my father came to our studio in Marion, Ohio, to sit with us while we finished our day's work, just to be where Dale and I were. Papa loved us enough to spend time with us, to give us approval, love, and to share his strength. Words weren't necessary, just his presence gave us the message. What a blessing. To appreciate these wonderful things that happen is really living. We all are so fortunate to have had our wonderful parents who, with all of their responsibilities and workload, never lost their faith that God would guide and care for them and their family. I know they are very proud of each of us as they look down on this Lakeside gathering. Dale and I always were so proud to be a part of the Zook family. I love each and every one, and may God bless and keep you always. Lenore Zook Hughes. Augusta Smallshaw. Yes, as Ruth's mother, I have been invited to Lakeside many times and always enjoyed my visit. One year when Peter was there, he said, Grandma, I have been coming down here since I was a baby, and I want to take you for a walk around Lakeside. We had a lovely walk, and as he knew, I am fond of dogs. We stopped at every house that had a dog in front, and he took a snap of me and the dog. It was fun. As you know, I fell and broke my hip a month or so ago, and will not be there this time. But I will be thinking of you all with love and best wishes. Augusta Smallshaw. David Wiesenauer. The second year Carol and I were married, we spent the Labor Day weekend in the Annie Laurie Cottage. The cottage was very crowded that year, and the sleeping arrangements resulted in our sleeping in the living room on a sleep sofa. Also in the living room, sleeping dormitory style, were Frank Fralick, Carol's dad Doran, and I'm not quite sure who else. During the night, Carol woke me up to tell me to quit snoring and roll over. Well, we were both awake, and the snoring continued. We raised up and looked at Doran and Frank, who were both noted for their snoring abilities. We had a good laugh and went back to sleep. She did not accuse me again the rest of the weekend. David Wiesenauer. Michael S. Ray. Many Lakeside memories from over the years vividly stand out in my mind. All-night pillow fights with my cousins on the third floor of the Breeze Inn. The taste of my grandma's homemade chocolate chip cookies. Sailing in catamarans with my cousins and Uncle John. winning the much coveted free ticket at putt-putt, the smell of Bill Smith's pipe, talking with relatives on the porch, penny ante poker games in smoke-filled dining rooms, my cousin Peter's jokes, throwing stones at the throngs of tiny black spiders that inhabit the rocky shoreline, the musty smell of lakeside cottages, the chimes of the old pavilion, eating tin roofs at the patio, etc. But I have one memory that stands head and shoulders above the rest. When I was 11, a group of my cousins and I went for an afternoon swim off the Lakeside dock. A storm was brewing over the lake, made the water quite rough and quite exhilarating. Again and again the rolling swells lifted and dropped us, making us feel weightless in the buoying water. It didn't matter that water got in our noses and mouths, or that we sometimes dunked in the trough of a big wave. We were getting the best roller coaster ride in the world for free, compliments of Lake Erie. Not being a good swimmer, however, in fact I didn't even know how to swim, I soon became tired. My legs became rubbery. My lungs began to burn, and my entire body became cold and weak. Too exhausted to tread water any longer, I started to dog paddle for the nearest ladder. No matter how hard I paddled, however, the ladder got no closer. In fact, it seemed to be moving farther away. I paddled forever against the choppy waves, but it was no use. I simply was too tired. Soon I reached the point of near total collapse. Then, just as I was thinking about doing a survival float on my belly until I regained my strength, my cousin Peter swam up alongside me, giving me an unexpected jolt. He first eyed me suspiciously, and then in a smart-mouthed tone of voice sarcastically said, "Are you drowning?" as he easily glided by me. Drowning? I wish he hadn't said that, for panic seized me, and I floundered and sputtered in the cold green water. Twice I went under, my flailing hands vainly groping for the side of the rusted dock. As I went under the second time, I heard someone shout, "Guard!" When I came up for air, choking on a mouthful of Lake Erie, I saw extended toward me from atop the edge of the dock the outstretched hand of a man bent down on one knee. Kicking furiously, I lunged for it, only to fall back and go under once more. Swimming underwater, not even knowing if I was going in the right direction, I managed to get close enough to the dock to grab the man's hand and be hauled up out of the lake. Michael S. Ray. Chris Field. We have always appreciated the friendly manner by which you included Bill and myself into your family gathering. You are a unique bunch of people, traditionally proud of a long heritage. It is a success story in itself. You are so different, all different from different parts of the country, but your love for Lakeside has drawn you into a wonderful and generous family. Generous indeed, as we came into your midst, needing a great deal of support and understanding. We, Bill and I, too, love Lakeside. Do have a wonderful celebration. I shall be thinking of you in Seoul, South Korea, where I will be attending the Baptist World Alliance. Have a wonderful time. God bless all of you, and many, many thanks for wonderful memories. Chris Field. Harold Freilich. It was the 1947 Lakeside reunion. Dick Ray and I decided to be aggressive and conquer the Kelly Island to Lakeside swim. With a great enthusiasm, we rented a small boat with a 10-horsepower motor. It was a bright, sunny morning as we left the Lakeside Pier to journey to Kelly's Island. A small group of family members were on the pier to see us start this record-setting trip. The boat trip to Kelly's Island was uneventful as clear skies prevailed. Our departure from Kelly's Island with Dick in the boat and Harold in the water took place at noon. There was no fanfare and no hands were assembled for the send-off. This adventure was going well for about the first half hour, and then the skies opened up and the storm began. With torrential rains accompanied by lightning and thunder, it took only several minutes before Dick and I were far apart. From that time on, it was a solo trip for both Dick and me. I do not know what time it was when Dick returned to the Lakeside Pier. It was late afternoon when I climbed up over the end of the pier to be greeted by a small, rather frantic, but happy gathering. Harold Freilich. Addendum to Harold Freilich's essay on the preceding page by Richard Ray, quote, Harold's story of his big swim isn't quite the way I remember it. We did run into some weather, but it didn't separate us, even though it must have seemed like it to Harold, with all the blowing waves. He kept calling to me, "Which direction?" and I kept raising my arm to point the way back to Lakeside. Then when his swim was almost completed, I threw him his bathing suit before he climbed out of the water. Wearing no suit is great for easier swimming, but not so great for greeting a welcome home committee. Richard Ray. Peter John Ray.
When I look back and think about Lakeside, it's hard to say that just one thing jumps out. When I was about 8 or 9, I was with Mike Ray, quote, on the rocks. He jumped to a rock a ways out in the water and back. I jumped out but was afraid to jump back. Mike had to go get Dave Wiesenhauer to help me back. One year I jumped off the pier at night with my clothes on a dare, and collected $1 from each cousin. Live and Let Die is the all-time greatest Lakeside movie for me. One night, in my mid-teens, I was with Mike, Greg, Chris, and John at the downtown pop machine. I put a canned tab in the coin slot. Greg tried to get a pop after that, but the machine seemed to be jammed. This man came along who seemed upset that Greg was banging the machine. He opened the machine, found the pop top, and confronted Greg with the evidence. After giving Greg a hard time, he left. Then I said something like, "Gee, Greg." Climbing the monument was a major event: putt-putt, shuffleboard tournaments, tennis, swimming. I have a very vague memory of Grandma Ray swimming off the rocks. The candle shop, the fireman's spaghetti dinner, the patio, the Hoover. Lakeside was the highlight of the year for me. I always had a great time until my mid-20s, when I attended several very depressed.
Dale Hughes is my name.
Cycling with Mike on Kelly's 2 years ago and last year on Put-in-Bay. It's been great to see my dad having so much fun. Gertrude and Helen sitting by the 9th hole at putt-putt, waiting for us. Harold's booming voice in the morning, an alarm clock. The wonderful Lakeside bells, Grandma's chocolate chip cookies in those tins. When I was younger, Lakeside was a week with Mike. The Lacey's coming really expanded things. One year, my dad said "shid" repeatedly, and Christopher took it up. He was pretty little. Pillow fights, dirty jokes, and stories at night. I always felt bad at the end of Lakeside. Had to go back to school. Funny, now I'm a teacher. The wine glass. Mike Ray remembers. Return of the Body Snatchers. Alan Pavlik. I remember Debbie Freilich smoking a pipe. Barb and Bill both added spice. I remember Bill Smith wearing red pants. We played an awful lot of putt-putt, and shuffleboard was a great discovery because it was free. The catamarans, poker games, ripping off Tracy and blackjack, Patty arriving near the end. In my dark years, Lakeside was the worst part of the year. I didn't want to talk to anybody. In today's world with weakening family ties, Lakeside has been a way for our family to stay together. My Lakeside memories mean a lot to me because they are family memories. I hope our tradition of Lakeside reunions will live forever. I send my love to all. Peter John Ray. Chris Lacey. I only remember a few things from Lakeside, which can be sung to the tune of "Those Are a Few of My Favorite Things," and these are: sturgeon eggs, of course, catching crawdads with Uncle John, stocking up, which only the kids would know, Hoover Auditorium, site of the Great Race, Carmina Burana, and countless other programs, poker, in which I was always whipped soundly, shuffleboard, or rather the resonant cry of "10 off, 10 off," emanating from Uncle John, putt-putt, and numerous free tickets, one of which I'm sure each of us has stuffed in a wallet or purse somewhere, and that eventually will have to be framed or bronzed, eating at the patio, pillow fights, and other silliness with the kids on the 3rd floor of the greenhouse, and consequently, the adults telling us to quiet down and go to bed, the dock which needs no other words, and just to see my relatives every year or so and catch up on their lives. One more thing, Mike Ray and his moccasins. I always wanted a pair just like them, but I never had enough money. Oh, shid. Chris Lacey. Patricia Ray. My earliest memories of Lakeside are from the house on Cherry Street. I remember every year there would be a table full of cookie tins of all shapes and sizes, filled with so many kinds of cookies. It seemed as though they'd last forever. By the end, with a few raisin cookies left, another Lakeside would be almost over. I also remember so many Lakesides with my sister Pamela there, but especially the last one. She was, as usual, full of ideas and was on her health food kick that year. I remember meals with liver casserole, wheat germ, whole wheat bread, and yogurt. And Pam had to have everybody try it out. During the meal, I think we gave Grandpa Ray a rubber hot dog disguised in real mustard, just to see the look on his face. I think he took a bite and then blushed. We had a good laugh. So I remember Pam and her liveliness and still miss her very much. Patricia Ray. James Marshall Zuck. I have many fond memories of our trips to Lakeside over the Labor Day holidays. One that stands out, though, happened when I was about 11 years old. The year would be 1938. My parents had invited my mother's Aunt Bertha and Uncle Marshall to go along with the family. At that time, there were so many family members going that more than one cottage was rented. I discovered one day that there was a gate in the fence running along the western side of the hotel. When I went through, I found that there were other members of the family before me. Some of the other boys, young men, and others were playing slot machines. This den of iniquity was a regular port of call for many in Lakeside, who found it to be pretty boring. They not only had slot machines, but pinball, and people were drinking. I discovered my Uncle Marshall playing the 1-cent machine, when to everyone's surprise he hit the jackpot. Pennies falling out of the machine, he must have been amazed. He was very close with his money. That was our secret for many years, for if Aunt Bertha had found out, we would have been in trouble. The name of this secret spot was Erie Beach. Jim Zuck. Steve and Connie Lacey on the 100th anniversary of the Zuck reunion. 1. Call the roll. Frank Freilich, John Lacey, David Morgan, Doran Ray, and John Zuck. The old guard had gathered. Down they sat. The young bucks, too. The command was given. Deal the cards. 5 cards stud. Deuces wild. On into the night they played, with the smell of cigar smoke and fresh fish fried all around them. John Zuck, the great fisherman, had quite a catch that day. As one by one the old guard fell away, the greatest fisherman of all had quite a catch too, you might say. 2. Outside the good old wooden gate, beyond the steel wire fence, lay a land of strange delight. Crawl under and enter in. The one-armed bandit beckons, a beginning of sin. So the young guard did, the Ray boys, Harold, the Lacey boys, and all the rest who dared cross over to the devil's land. 3. Sand and water, trees and sunlight, all the good things, all the bright and beautiful things at Bay Point Beach. It seems such a long time ago. 4. Swimming with the strokes of will, he crossed the path of the ferry boat. Rough seas and only a small boat to keep him straight on his path. Harold and Dick put Kelly Island on the map. 5. Pillow fights in the attic, legs that grew longer each year, with photos of progeny astride an ancient cannon. Swimming off the long stone dock, the games of golf, both maxi and mini, batting the speedy ball across the net, shuffling the pucks down the court. The new guard calls the roll. John, Dick, Harold, Marge, Dave, the young bucks, and a few does too. Play cards, my friends. The game is on. The childish things we watch them do, knowing we were one with our children's games. 6. Finishing the days with food. Abigail's or the hotel will do. For that late night snack, after the show or a movie, try a tin roof at the patio. Now there's a true devilish delight. 7. Yet we thought how quickly it all is gone. Sitting becalmed in a silent catamaran, Connie, Patty, Ruth, and John. 8. Early morning light just on the dock. The Lacey's trekked toward Fishhead. All said farewell. Connie had watched another birthday come and go, and the loving care of all those gathered here. Guiding our years with love and care, Gertrude, Lenore, and Helen, mothers to us all. The grand elder Lacey spent her 90th year among the clan, who gave their love as best they can. 9. The carillon chimes 100 years gone by.
and above them all, the silent lighted cross. Frank and Lena smiling there. God bless you all, everyone. Amen. As this memory book was born of the Zuck family reunion at Lakeside on August 19, 1990, may it live and be a part of the memorabilia shared at the bicentennial reunion of the Zuck family at Lakeside in the year 2090. The end. So that concludes today's presentation. Zuck Family Reunions at Lakeside, Ohio, 1890 to 1990. Good luck with you, to you, with your efforts in family history, if this interests you. Finding, preserving, and sharing old letters, diaries, and photographs, and interviewing elderly relatives while they're alive. Thanks so much for watching. You might consider checking out our website, Adventures in History, with Peter J. Ray at peterjray.com. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. God bless you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.